My name is Earl Miller. For 42 years, my whole world has been 3 feet of glass, a 10-speed shifter, and the white lines hypnotizing me down the loneliest highways in America. I've hauled everything from California oranges to Wyoming cattle, seen every sunrise over the Rockies and every sunset bleed into the plains of Kansas. You see a lot out here in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn when the world belongs only to the hum of your engine and the crackle of the CB radio. You see things most folks, tucked in their beds, would call nightmares or fairy tales. I know better. It started small, like most things do. Little oddities you brush off as fatigue, tricks of the light. A set of headlights in your rearview mirror on a dead-straight stretch of I-80 in Nevada. There 1 second, gone the next. No exits, no turnoffs. Just gone. Or a town, a little flicker of lights maybe 10 miles off the highway, a place called Havenwood on a faded sign. You make a note to stop there for coffee on the return trip, but when you come back through, there's no sign, no turnoff, nothing but empty desert where a town should be. The old-timers, the guys I learned the ropes from back in the 70s, they had stories. They called them long-haul legends. Don't pick up a hitchhiker on Route 66 after dark. Never stop at a diner with no other trucks in the lot. And if you see a rig with no markings, all black, running silent with its lights dimmed, you pull over and you let it pass. You don't make eye contact, and you don't ask questions. For years, I treated them as just that. Stories, ways to pass the time, to keep your mind sharp on a 3-day haul. But then you start to connect the dots. You see the same driver, a man with cold, unblinking eyes at a truck stop in Nebraska, and then 2 days later, you see the exact same man looking not a day older at a way station in Arizona. You notice that the strange, silent black rigs all seem to be heading to or from the same remote, unmarked distribution centers, places that don't show up on any commercial map. You start to realize that what happens out here on the asphalt sea isn't random. It's a system, a network hiding in plain sight. We truckers, we're the blood life of this country, hauling its goods, its food, its future. But there's another network running parallel to ours. They look like us, they drive trucks like us, but they're not hauling produce. They're hauling secrets. And I've been sharing the road with them my entire life. The real turning point for me, the moment I went from a guy who'd seen some weird stuff to a man who knew he was looking at a conspiracy, was the winter of '96. I was hauling a load of medical supplies to a new research hospital in Colorado. The route took me through Utah on US 50, a stretch they call the loneliest road in America. It's a fitting name. You can drive for hours and not see another soul. A blizzard hit, a real nasty one, came out of nowhere. The snow was so thick it was like driving through milk. My radio was spitting nothing but static. I was crawling along, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, when my headlights caught a sign I'd never seen before. Sign, "Turn right for Federal Service Route 77A, authorized vehicles only." It wasn't on my map. Government roads aren't uncommon, usually leading to a military base or a comms tower. But this one was different. The pavement was perfectly black, clear of snow, and seemed to hum with a low warmth that was melting the flakes as they fell. My truck was struggling in the snow, and, against my better judgment, I took the turn. The road was like a piece of the future. It was a smooth, dark surface, no lines, no potholes, and it curved gently through the hills. The storm seemed to fade away the further I drove on it. After about 10 miles, I saw them. A convoy. 6 of those all-black, unmarked rigs I'd been taught to avoid. They were parked in a perfect line at a massive, windowless concrete structure that looked like a cross between a distribution center and a military bunker. It was built right into the side of a mesa. There was no sign, no fence, just the building and the trucks. Men were moving between the rigs and the building. They weren't wearing heavy winter gear, just simple dark coveralls, despite the cold. They moved with a strange, efficient silence. I pulled my rig over, killing the engine and lights, and watched through my binoculars. They weren't loading or unloading cargo. They were swapping out the trailers, but the trailers themselves looked odd. They had a strange, matte black finish, with no logos and complex-looking pipes and vents running along the sides, humming with the same low energy as the road. That's when I saw the car. A black government sedan, a Ford Crown Victoria, pulled up. A man in a dark suit got out. He didn't look like a trucker or a warehouse worker. He looked like a Fed. He spoke to one of the drivers, a tall, gaunt man with those same cold, unblinking eyes I'd seen before. The driver handed him a small, metallic briefcase. The Fed nodded and then drove off. I got out of there, my heart hammering. This wasn't just a group of strange truckers. This was an operation, an organized, high-level operation involving our own government. These weren't just weird roads. They were ghost lanes, a secret highway system built for a purpose I couldn't begin to fathom. The stories weren't just legends. They were a warning that the real long haul happening on America's roads was a conspiracy of silence.
After that night in Utah, the road was never the same. Every shadow seemed longer. Every pair of headlights in my mirror felt like a threat. I wasn't just hauling freight anymore. I was a ghost haunting a secret world, and I was starting to think the other ghosts were noticing me. The cold, unblinking stares from certain drivers at truck stops lingered a little longer. A few times, I'd come out of a diner to find a fresh scratch on my driver's side door, too deliberate to be accidental. It was a warning. Back off. But I couldn't. I had to know more. I started keeping a logbook, not just of my miles and cargo, but of every strange sighting. The black rigs, the ghost towns, the drivers who seemed to exist outside of time. I marked their routes on a map I kept hidden under my bunk. A pattern began to emerge. Their movements weren't random. They converged on remote, desolate areas, often near sensitive government sites, military test ranges in Nevada, deep space communication arrays in New Mexico, even the quiet, rural areas surrounding Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. I realized their network wasn't just about moving things, it was about listening. They were positioned at the nerve centers of the country. The biggest question was how they communicated. They never used the open CB channels. Their silence was one of the most unnerving things about them, so I decided to listen differently. I had a friend back in Texas, a crazy genius who used to build pirate radio stations. I paid him a visit, told him I was a hobbyist looking to pick up some unusual signals. For $1,000 cash, he modified my CB radio, expanding its frequency range deep into the subharmonic and ultra-high frequency bands, far beyond anything the FCC would ever approve. Back on the road, my cab became a listening post. For weeks, it was nothing but dead air and the strange, natural static of the earth itself. Then one night, driving through the empty plains of Wyoming, I found it. It was a tight beam transmission, so focused you could only catch it for a few miles at a time. It wasn't a voice. It was a series of low-frequency, resonant clicks and a high-pitched, chittering static, almost like insect singing. It was a language, I was sure of it. It was rhythmic, complex, and utterly alien. I started hunting the signals. I'd deviate from my route, chasing these invisible whispers across the heartland. I learned that the signals were strongest near their convoys and their hidden bunkers. They were talking to each other, coordinating, in a language no human was ever meant to hear. I was an intruder, listening in on a private conversation that had been happening on our roads right under our noses for decades. And the more I listened to what I started calling the devil's static, the more I felt the chilling certainty that I was getting closer to a truth that was vast, ancient, and very, very dangerous. Listening to the devil's static became my obsession. I started to recognize patterns in the clicks and chitters. There were short, sharp bursts. I figured those were logistical, like convoy arriving or route clear. But then there were the long-haul signals, deep, resonant hums that would last for hours, almost like a massive data transfer. They were always broadcast from a stationary point, and the black rigs would often park nearby for the duration, their engines idling in the dead of night, as if they were downloading something. I decided to follow one of these long-haul signals to its source. The signal was strong, emanating from a small, forgettable town in rural Nebraska called Harmony. According to my map, there was nothing there but a grain silo and a few dozen houses. I took a detour, parking my rig at a run-down truck stop a few miles away and walking into town under the cover of a moonless night. Harmony was a perfect slice of Americana, the kind of place people think doesn't exist anymore. Manicured lawns, flags on every porch, a quiet town square. The signal was coming from the center of town, from the old radio station building, WZ Harmony. It was a quaint brick building with a tall, old-fashioned transmission tower rising into the night sky. It looked innocent, a relic from a bygone era. I crept closer, staying in the shadows. There were no black rigs, no men in suits, just the quiet hum of the transmission tower. But as I got to the back of the building, I saw it. A thick, black armored cable, the same kind I'd seen at the Utah bunker, snaked out from the base of the radio tower and went deep underground. The tower wasn't broadcasting old-time radio shows. It was broadcasting the devil's static, a constant, powerful stream of it. I found a dirty window and peered inside. The radio station was a front. The broadcasting equipment was all disconnected, covered in dust. The real operation was in the center of the room. A single person, a woman, sat in a strange high-backed chair, her back to me. Wires ran from the chair to the main transmitter. She was perfectly still. I thought she might be a mannequin until she slowly turned her head. Her eyes were open, but they were milky white, unfocused. She wasn't seeing the room. She was seeing something else entirely. She was the receiver, a human terminal. Her mind was the modem, translating the alien signal into something. And then I realized the most horrifying part. The people of Harmony, sleeping in their beds, were the intended audience. The signal wasn't just being broadcast into space, it was being broadcast into the town. A low-level, pervasive hum that you could live your whole life in and never consciously notice. What were they broadcasting? What were they downloading into the minds of these innocent people? The thought sent a spike of pure ice through my veins. This wasn't just a logistics network. It was a delivery system. And the cargo was something they were planting directly into our brains. I was backing away, my mind screaming, when a floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around. A tall, gaunt man in a simple mechanic's uniform stood there, his face impassive, his eyes the same cold, dead eyes I'd seen a dozen times before. He wasn't surprised to see me. He was waiting for me.
The mechanic didn't speak. He didn't need to. His cold eyes told me everything. He knew I'd seen too much. He moved with a quiet, unsettling speed, and before I could react, he had me in a grip of surprising strength, his hand clamped over my mouth. He wasn't going to hurt me, not here, not openly. He was going to disappear me, make me another one of those long-haul legends, a driver who just vanished on a lonely stretch of highway. He led me away from the radio station, not towards the street, but towards the back, to a plain, unmarked van parked in the shadows. My mind was racing. I had to get away, had to warn someone, but my every struggle was met with a silent, unyielding force. He opened the van's side door, and I saw two more of them inside, their faces equally blank and emotionless. This wasn't just about keeping a secret. It was about maintaining control.
anyone who stumbled too close was managed. Just as they were about to push me into the van, a sound cut through the quiet night. The low, resonant hum of a powerful engine. Headlights appeared down the deserted street, growing brighter rapidly. It was my rig, but I hadn't left the engine running. The black semi-truck barreled down the street, its air brakes hissing as it screeched to a stop right in front of the van, blocking their escape. The driver's side door swung open, and a figure stepped out. Tall, gaunt, with the same cold eyes as the mechanic. But there was something different about him, an air of authority. He looked at the mechanic holding me, then at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He spoke, his voice low and gravelly, the first human words I'd heard from any of them. He's inquisitive. The mechanic released me instantly, stepping back with a deference that surprised me. The tall driver gestured towards my truck with a gloved hand. "Get in your vehicle, Miller." Fear warred with a desperate surge of hope. They weren't going to kill me, not yet anyway. They were making a different kind of decision. I scrambled back into my cab, my hands shaking as I started the engine. The black semi-truck didn't move. It just sat there, a silent escort as I slowly drove out of Harmony. I watched in my rearview mirror as the mechanic and his companions got back into their van and disappeared down a side street. The black semi-truck followed me for what felt like hours, its headlights a constant presence in my mirror. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't comforting either. It was a reminder. They knew who I was, what I knew, and where I was going. Finally, as dawn began to break over the horizon, the black truck's lights flickered once, then turned off. It pulled over to the side of the road and just sat there, a silent sentinel watching me drive away. I didn't stop driving until I crossed state lines. I knew they could find me anywhere, but I needed distance, needed time to think. They had let me go, but why? Was this a chance? Or was I now a pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game? One thing was certain, my life on the open road had changed forever. The long haul had just become a whole lot longer, and the cargo I was carrying was no longer just freight. It was a secret, and it was heavy enough to crush me. For a month, I tried to lay low. I took local routes, hauling gravel and dusty quarries, anything to stay off the major interstates. But you can't outrun a shadow. The feeling of being watched was a constant weight on my shoulders. Every black sedan that stayed behind me for more than a mile, every quiet phone call that clicked when I answered, it was all a reminder that I was on a leash. Then, the package arrived. I found it on the passenger seat of my locked cab after a stop in Amarillo. No postage, no return address. Just a simple, brown paper-wrapped box. Inside was a brand new military-grade satellite phone and a single typed note. "Your old routes are no longer profitable, Mr. Miller. We have a new dispatch for you. Await instructions." It wasn't a request. The message was clear. My life as a normal trucker was over. I was either going to work for them or I was going to disappear. The fear was cold and sharp, but underneath it was a flicker of something else. A burning, desperate curiosity. This was my chance to see behind the curtain, to understand the why of it all. I took the phone. The first call came a week later. The voice was synthesized, a flat, digital monotone. It gave me a set of coordinates, a pickup time, and a cargo manifest that simply read, "Geological samples." The pickup location wasn't a warehouse or a distribution center. It was a remote, abandoned silver mine in the mountains of Idaho. When I arrived, two of the gaunt, silent men were waiting. They loaded a single, heavy, hermetically sealed container into my trailer. It was cold to the touch, and a low, almost sub-audible hum emanated from it. They said nothing, just locked the trailer doors and handed me another note with a destination: a private agricultural research facility in California's Central Valley. That trip was the longest of my life. I wasn't just hauling freight, I was part of their network. I was a ghost lane driver. I noticed the other black rigs on the road treated me differently now. They would flash their lights once as they passed, a silent acknowledgement. I was one of them. I had been recruited. The cargo was my biggest clue.
What kind of geological samples needed to be transported with such secrecy? What did a mine in Idaho have to do with a farm in California? I thought back to the radio station in Harmony, to the idea of something being planted in our world. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just moving their technology around, they were terraforming. Slowly, quietly, piece by piece, they were changing our world from the ground up, preparing it for something.